Hello, my name is Lee Mackenzie, and this is a short audio guide to accompany you as you walk around the Winterbourne Gardens. I will give you prompts and ideas to consider as you move through the environment, and these will be directed to how you think about, experience, and respond to the spaces that you encounter. Please write any thoughts you have in a notebook or on a piece of paper. I hope you enjoy your walk. We will begin here at the terrace, and soon we will walk in a clockwise manner around the gardens. Over to your left is the walled garden. You might be able to see its brick walls, its enclosed nature, both snugly inviting and privileged in some way. But we can deal with that in a short while. First, let us focus on this terrace. Perhaps you can see people sitting on the tables and benches near to you. Perhaps they are chatting with a friend or relative, eating a scone, jam or cream first, Devon, Cornwall. You might consider who you would like to bring here. Who would enjoy this sort of place? Perhaps a friend who has a soft spot for plant names, a burgeoning green-fingered sort, or a relative who honestly inquires, "How are you?" Would they like a scone? And what would they make of that view in front of you, falling away towards some distant, unknowable border? Maybe they would ask you what you make of the row of yew trees in the mid-distance, clipped into perfect polygonic shapes that look like both parts of an exclamation mark. What do they exclaim? Or are they ellipses, suggesting something else that is left unsaid? What would you say to that person on this terrace? Look a little to your right, at the trees that frame the walkway leading into the garden. Their branches join up like arms, reaching out to one another. Pleaching, that's the name for this type of cultivation. And when the gardens were first created, a decision was made to commit to this project, to prune errant branches and bind together those that were fanning out at the right places from the tree trunks. How these projects of ordering and connection take time and dedication. Consider how you cultivate your connections. Where have you agreed to bind yourself, to create something greater, to join in with something and commit? Perhaps create a list of the connections that you have formed. Perhaps also take a moment to mourn and revere the limbs you cut away. Pause this now and spend some time reflecting. When you are done, proceed to the walled garden. You are standing inside the walled garden. Like the neat rows of vegetables and flowers, you have increased protection from the wind and the frost. Spare a thought for the plants and patrons of the garden who are outside these walls, susceptible to the elements in a way that you are not. You are within, they are without. You can probably feel that it is slightly warmer here than in the other areas of the gardens. As you are walking towards its bottom right-hand corner, consider whether you can perceive that increased warmth and protection. What does it feel like at the ends of your fingers, on the fine hairs of your ears? How is it that a few bricks and some mortar can change the environment so wholly? Once you are in the bottom right-hand corner of the walled garden, you'll find planted rows of vegetables, chard, peas, some lettuce, sprouts, all the solid produce that people grow on allotments across the country. Think of the thousands of meals where people will have eaten and discussed the crunch of their grandfather's runner beans or the roasted sweetness of their neighbour's courgettes. All the hidden labour of their hands and wheelbarrows turning, working to refine a little plot tucked away behind an old telephone exchange or on the floodplains of our streams. Why do we seem to value this hand-wrought food more than the produce of supermarkets? Or maybe I'm just jumping to conclusions. It's difficult not to, really. We like to try to order things, to make conclusions and make sense of our environments. Think of those pleached trees, arm in arm. We like to see and encourage the connections to make the world more manageable. Take that rhubarb plant there, Linnaeus. Can you find it? It is named after the Swedish botanist who made it his life's work to classify all plants. For this, he needed a framework and settled on giving things two Latin names. First, a name for its broad class, its genus, and second, a name for its subclass, its species. Homo sapiens, that's us. Rosa Molyneux, the English rose. Dendrocopus major, the greater spotted woodpecker. Can you hear it, knocking in the nearby woods? This process of naming, of systemic thought, is so very useful to us. We can make associations that help us to further understand our experience of the world. And yet, to ascribe too closely to these systems, to hold onto them, is to close ourselves off to new associations, and in a sense, our ability to be creative. How strange it is that our ability to frame and make sense of the world can be so detrimental to our happiness over time. Pause this audio now and spend 10 minutes here, seeking out the connections we make in our environments. Consider also the blind spots we have when we make those connections. Perhaps you could count the number of petals on one plant to see if it remains consistent. Or perhaps you could compare the odours rippling off of the flower heads. What frameworks, if any, can you apply to this space? Once you are ready, walk to the exit at the lowest part of the walled garden. Having walked underneath the brick arch, you will find yourself between a wooden and glass building on your left and a covered walkway on your right. Go left into the Gilbert Orchid House. It is very warm here, isn't it? Humid. Your breathing, perhaps, is a little more noticeable than when you were outside. Maybe that's the first thing you notice. Or maybe it's the strangeness of the plants. The drape of what looks like straggly grey hair. Green jug-like vessels protruding from thick vines. How everything seems alive, almost like it's watching you. It is as if you are being seen by something other than you. By their nature, glasshouses allow us to come into contact with plants that would not necessarily be available in our natural environments. They offer us the capacity to enter self-contained other worlds, where the typical associations we make can be left at the door. For instance, that plant you are looking at eats insects. That other plant too easily defies gravity. Suddenly you notice how it must be so very different to live life in such a wet, oppressive heat. Head through the glasshouse and exit into a small courtyard of glass houses. Here is a host of other places where you can be and do and think about everything in a way beyond your normal processes of thought. You don't have to be who you are. Remember at school when you played with that new friend that you had never played with before, how you could act so differently because they knew so little about you. Or the time abroad, on holiday, when you considered moving there, and how you saw yourself as that local person reclining on the chapel steps in the setting sun, eating an ice cream. This is the perfect place to explore difference and what it means to be different. As you walk around, maybe something familiar in the environment will become estranged. A water droplet on the tip of your houseplant now sits comfortably on a grey-blue thorn of a 6-foot cactus. Or perhaps what is estranged will become familiar. How can the ocean's chambered nautilus grow in a pattern of spirals that we recognise within ourselves? Take 10 minutes to explore the different versions of you. Exit the glasshouse area at its lowest point and meet with a long walkway that extends right. This path leads all the way to the stream that runs out of Edgbaston Golf Course and along the bottom of the gardens. Before you follow the path, look at the monolith in front of you. Chiselled into its stone are the names of the Earth's geological time periods, from the earliest period of the Earth's formation, the Precambrian, to its most recent, the Quaternary. These few words represent 4.5 billion years, but who could get close to contemplating what that actually looks like, or indeed feels like? Instead, look along the path. Like all paths, here is a neat allusion to time. To walk along it is to move through time and to register various landmark moments along the way. As you walk along, consider time as you can understand it, as different periods within your life, different sections that represent different outlooks you may have had, or the different spaces that you inhabited. How did you feel within each time period? Can you see them coming towards you on the path as you walk? How about those trees on the left? Do they remind you of something constant which remained throughout? Does the closed gate, also on your left, indicate a route you had intended to follow but didn't or couldn't? And what of this large dead tree on your right? Without its canopy and stripped of most of its bark, it still seems bigger than the other trees around it. What can this possibly mean? And what do those creeping vines, roped to the top of the tree, indicate? How do they use the stability of a dead tree to begin new life? Soon you will reach a small shelter on your right. It is opposite the rock garden and sits overlooking the stream. It is called the Japanese tea house. Sit down there, pause the audio, and take a few minutes for some silent contemplation. After all, you've come a long way. In the past, this area was referred to as the Badlands by some of Winterbourne's earliest gardeners. With springs rising to the right of the path and a dawdling stream to the left, the sitting water provided perfect conditions for gnats and insects to thrive. It still does. Perhaps you can see them now, dotting the air, using a palette of senses to produce an experience we would find impossible to comprehend. Could we even begin to understand the gnat? Can we understand, or at least empathise, with those old gardeners? Times do change, and badlands are reappraised. Now, we understand the need for environments that are not necessarily amenable to us, to humans, and their cultivation methods. These places run a little wilder, hosting many unfathomable and messy layers that bring us to the limits of our intellectual understanding. Accept this and explore the area. Get a sense of how this is the wildest part of the gardens, a kind of managed chaos of visual noise, where giant rhubarbs colonise the woodland backdrop. Algae grows amongst stepping stones, and red maple leaves moulder in the crevices of duckboards. Look at the Japanese bridge, trying to maintain its simple premise, to cross a stream. But ask yourself, why? Why cross this bridge? Why do you want to get to the other side? Why would that be a satisfying thing to do? This is your broader task here. Find something interesting in this landscape and interrogate it as best you can. Consider, why is that leaf red? Why is the stream flowing in that direction? Why does the path end where it does? I want you to follow your reasoning back as far as you can by asking the question why. Do it until you cannot ask it anymore, until you reach the limits of your world. Pause the audio. We will now return back to Winterbourne House. Head along the same path in the opposite direction. You are walking back towards the stone monolith that lists the epochs of time. You will pass the Japanese tea house and the bold tree on your left. And as you are walking, question whether you have been altered in some small way by this short walk. Do you feel refreshed from a slew of new thoughts? Or do you feel slightly odd, discombobulated, like you've been walking with your shoes on the wrong feet? Reflect on the ideas you have had and the notes that you have made. For a brief moment, let the blast of colour from the rhododendrons on your right take over. Its bright flower heads, its verdant green foliage. Then walk on. Spot a memorial to an English oak. Why someone would make a tombstone to a tree. Or don't. That is also fine. We are slowly parting ways. Soon, I will no longer be a voice in your head, and all in all, that's probably for the best. One more thing. Take the left before the stone monolith. I want you to walk through the nut walk. You can't miss it. It's a semicircle of hazelnut trees, providing shade in the height of summer and a sweet nut in autumn. I was 35 before I tasted my first freshly picked hazelnut. It was in the shadow of Scafell Pike in the Lake District. After a swim in Wast Water, Tom passed me one as we walked back to our base for the night. It was fresh and sweet and singular, and a memory tucked away in my mind, ready to rush forward in certain moments and lead my pattern of thoughts. With that in mind, what single sweet nut of memory can you take away from today?
I haven't seen one, have you?
No.
Because in Bristol, if you walk like this, they'd be running around here all the time. People trying to feed.